Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome devotees from Morning Bhagavatam class. This morning we will be continuing with Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, verse 42. The chapter is entitled Dhritarashtra Quits Home, and the class will be given by His Grace Parikshit Prabhu from ISKCON Harrisburg. Without further delay, we will start right into class. Hare Krishna.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Ganavallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Ganavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Rajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Rajajanaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Ganavallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Ganavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Jaganaranjana Yashodanandana Jaganaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radhe Jaya Jagannath Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Goranita Jaya Goranita Jaya Goranita Jaya Goranita Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Gurudev Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev Nitai Gora Hari Bo Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitai Gora Hari Bo Nitai Gora Hari Bo Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitai Gora Hari Bo Jaya Vishnupad Paramhamsa Privajikacharya Stotra Satya Shrimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhansa Privajikacharya Stotra Satya Shrimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Vem Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Dvaita Gadadhar Shivashari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mathura Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai, Samavita Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Pramanandi, Hare Hare Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Peshtaya, Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Tere Swami Niti Namini. Namaste, Krishna Padaya, Prabhupada, Siddhartha Sri, Gaura Karuna Shakti, Bhakti Tere Niti Namini. Narayana Namaskritta, Naroncheva, Narotamam, Devim Saraswati Vyasam, Tato Jayam Udirayat, Nashta Prayeswa Bhadresu, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavata Uttamasloke, Bhaktir Bhavati Naishiki, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Good morning, dear devotees. This morning's class from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, Text 42. Yatha gavo nasi protas, tantyam bharas chadamavi, vaktantyam namavi bhadam, vahanti valim ishitu. Yata gavo nasi protas, tantyam bharas chadamavi, vaktantyam namavi bhadam, vahanti valim ishitu. Yata gavo nansi potas, tantyam bhadas chandamavi, bhaktantyam namavi bhada, vahanti valim ishitu. Hare Krishna. Please chant.
Yata gavo nasi protas tantyam badhaschadhamabhi vaktantyam namabhir badha vahante balim ishitu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else like to try? Okay, we'll do word for word. Yata, as much as, gava, cow, nasi, by the nose, prota, strong, tantyam, by the thread, bada, bound by, cha, also, dhamabhi, by ropes, vak, tantyam, in the network of Vedic hymns, namabhi, by nomenclatures, vada, conditioned, vahanti, carry on, balim, orders, ishitu, for being controlled by the Supreme Lord. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. As a cow bound through the nose by a long rope is conditioned, so also human beings are bound by different Vedic conditions. So also human beings are bound by different Vedic injunctions and are conditioned to obey the orders of the Supreme. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Every living being, whether a man or an animal or a bird, thinks that he is free by himself, but actually no one is free from the severe laws of the Lord. The laws of the Lord are severe because they cannot be disobeyed in any circumstance. The man-made laws may be evaded by cunning outlaws, but in the codes of the Supreme Lawmaker, there is not the slightest possibility of neglecting the laws. A slight change in the course of God-made law can bring about a massive danger to be faced by the lawbreaker. Such laws of the Supreme are generally known as the codes of religion under different conditions, but the principle of religion everywhere is one and the same, namely to obey the orders of the Supreme God, the codes of religion. Disobedience to these codes is the condition of material existence. All living beings in the material world have taken up the risk of conditioned life by their own selection and are thus entrapped by the laws of material nature. The only way to get out of the entanglement is to agree to obey the Supreme. But instead of becoming free from the clutches of Maya or illusion, foolish human beings become bound up by different nomenclatures being designated as Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, Hindus, Mohammedans, Indians, Europeans, Americans, Chinese, and many others. And thus they carry out the orders of the Supreme Lord under the influence of respective scriptural or legislative injunctions. The statutory laws of the state are imperfect imitation replicas of religious codes. The secular state or the godless state allows citizens to break the laws of God, but restricts them from disobeying the laws of the state. The result is that the people in general suffer more by breaking the laws of God than by obeying the imperfect laws made by man. Every man is imperfect by constitution under the conditions of material existence. And there is not the least possibility that even the most materially advanced man can enact perfect legislation. On the other hand, there is no such imperfection in the laws of God. If leaders are educated in the laws of God, there is no necessity of a makeshift legislative council of aimless men. There is necessity of change in the makeshift laws of man, but there is no change in the God-made laws because they are made perfect by the all-perfect personality of Godhead. The codes of religion, scriptural injunctions, are made by liberated representatives of God in consideration of different conditions of living. And by carrying out the orders of the Lord, the conditioned living beings gradually become free from the clutches of material existence. The factual position of the living being is, however, that he is the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. In his liberated state, he renders service to the Lord in transcendental love, and thus enjoys a life of full freedom, even sometimes on an equal level with the Lord, or sometimes more than the Lord. But in the conditioned material world, every living being wants to be the Lord of other living beings. And thus, by the illusion of Maya, this mentality of lording it over becomes a cause of further extension of conditional life. So in the material world, the living being is still more conditioned until he surrenders unto the Lord by reviving his original state of eternal servitorship. That is the last instruction of Bhagavad Gita and all other recognized scriptures of the world. Om Gnata Mirandasya Gyana Gyana Shalakaya Chakshu Amilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupa Sagijatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanusute Devi Paramami Hari Priye Vanchakapatrubhescha Kripasindhive Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Peshtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschatya Deshatarini Namo Mahabhadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurachishe Namaha Ananda Lilamaya Vigrahaya Himavya Devacha Vishnaraya Tasmi Mahaprema Raspadaya Chaitanya Chandaya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandaya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandaya Namo Namaste. Chaitanya Chandaya Namo Namaste. Hare Krishna. So the English translation of this text is, as a cow bound through the nose by a long rope is conditioned, so also human beings are bound by different Vedic injunctions and are conditioned to obey the orders of the Supreme. Hare Krishna. So it would be nice to say this to an atheist because they would not believe it. The last sentence here is what just came to mind. Is it really true that so also human beings are bound by different Vedic injunctions and are conditioned to obey the orders of the Supreme? The Lord has two principal energies, spiritual and material. The spiritual laws are there, the material laws are there. And the Lord says, Ye yatamapapadante tamstateva pajamyaham. The extent to which one surrenders, he rewards accordingly. The rest of the text is that everyone follows my path in all circumstances, O son of Peter, Arjun. He's telling Arjun, the extent to which we surrender to him, he rewards accordingly. We surrender 20%, he rewards 20%. We surrender 100%, he will reward 100%. That's the way it is. Therefore, nobody is ever cheated by the Lord. But since the material and the spiritual are all coming from the Lord, then everything that's here is bound by the laws of God. Once you are a soul existing in this world, part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you're either in the spiritual or you're in the material energies, influenced by one of the two. And the material energy has its laws, and the spiritual energy also, there are laws. And Srila Prabhupada explains it nicely in the purport. So whichever way we turn, we're going to be bound by one of those. In the material nature, there are three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So somebody that is a complete materialist is always acting under goodness or passion or ignorance or a combination of the three or two. But they cannot act outside of that if it's a hardcore materialist. Therefore, what happens to the person is based on these three modes of energy, and the next life that they're going to be involved in is going to be decided by the agents of the Lord. It's not decided by the person. Dehino asminyata dehe komari uvaram jara tata dehantara prapti dhirastatara muhyati tata dehantara prapti. A person goes from one living situation in one material body, subtle as well as gross. Subtle body is the mind, intelligence, and ego or pride. And the physical body is made of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And we exist that way. The next life is going to be like that, based on what a person has accrued in previous lives and in the life just before they got to the next body. Therefore, if the transcendental system or the Lord's agents empower, or by the empowerment, they decide that a soul that was in the human body has lived a degrading life, and now they're going to go into the body of a pig. Srila Prabhupada explains, you cannot protest. Say, oh, no, I don't want to be in a pig body. The person will be put in the body of a pig. Therefore, the laws are like that. They are controlling us. And since it's explained that way, this is Narada Muni explaining. These Vedic injunctions are the way they are, and they are such that we are conditioned to obey the orders. And if we don't, and we stay in the material part of it, then we get chastisement or if we do something that is good, but at the material level, then we get some reward. But still, we are in the house of correction or the cosmic jail, the material world. So that's the way it's set up in the material world. And Narada Muni was explaining that living beings are conditioned to obey the orders of the Supreme. Therefore, Maharaj Yudhishthira should not worry too much about what was happening. Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, every living being, whether a man or an animal or a bird, thinks that he is free by himself, but actually nobody is free from the severe laws of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada uses the word severe for the example that we just gave, that if somebody doesn't want to go into the body of a pig in next life, he still will be asked to put in the body of, not being asked, they will put in the body of a pig. So the law said that's severe. He may not like it. So a situation that the person doesn't like, but it's applied to them anyway, that is a severe situation. That's why Srila Prabhupada uses the word severe laws. The laws of the Lord, Srila Prabhupada says, are severe because they cannot be disobeyed in any circumstance. Still, people think that we are free by ourselves. But the only thing is to disprove that point is very easy. We are free. What's the temperature today? Whatever it is, if you look it up, did you make that temperature outside that way? No, it was imposed upon us, wasn't it? Yes. And if it's imposed upon you, that is the law. That's the decision that's made by higher authorities that this is the way today is going to be. Therefore, if they decide at any time that there's going to be snow, then there will be snow. And at any time when the weather is supposed to be in the colder times, that all of a sudden there is more warmth, unusual warmth. We don't plan that either. We call it the quick summer, but in the winter time. So we give it a name. That's all we can do. We can give names, but we can't do anything to change the way things are. The man-made laws may be evaded by cunning outlaws. People who have money these days, because Kali Yuga is raging on, they try to get around laws. If you have a very good lawyer, you can you can be involved in a crime and get away with it because a lawyer can change things. Or Congress can meet, or Parliament, depending on the country, and say things are this way and that way, therefore we're going to change the laws or we're going to amend the laws. The Constitution of the United States was put together, the laws that the country was going to abide, and then there were amendments, and quite a few amendments too. And they're still fighting the amendments, trying to change the amendments too. But the laws of the Lord remain the same. Now, the laws of the Lord are straightforward for a devotee, and we'll talk about what a devotee is supposed to do so that we will naturally live in harmony with the laws of the Lord. That will be done a little later. A slight change in the course of God-made law can bring about a massive danger to be faced by the lawbreaker. Anyone who breaks the laws, the Lord is still merciful, so he gives a chance for people to try to rectify the situation. But if they don't, then warnings come. Warnings come in different situations. Right now, there are so many wars that are going on around the world. Only some of them chosen by the press is actually included in the news, and some report is made about that particular war. And right now it's about Russia and Ukraine, and that's the one that's given most press. But around the world, there's an average of about 35 to 36 wars going on around this particular planet, on top of this particular planet, nation against nation. And they all stem from one thing. The laws of the Lord state that we are the spirit soul. And we're supposed to be the servant of a servant of a servant of God. Those who are not doing that and trying to do things on their own don't know that we are all of the same substance. Satchidananda, the soul, is eternal, full of knowledge, and full of bliss. That's our nature, and that we have been put into this material world because we went against the nature of the way we should live our lives in the spiritual world. We're envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that's how we wound up here in the material world. Still, people are trying to, oh, we will make it in the material world. But as long as somebody's trying to not cooperate, but to compete, then the cheating comes in, because that's part of the nature of 4 defects of a human. Cheating comes in. And so cheating is there internationally and intranationally. Inside the country, there are people who cheat others in different levels. And then international cheating is going on. And people resort to the military, try to build up ammunition so that they can let people know, well, I'm strong like that, therefore my word is final. You have to obey my word. Trying to control like that. And that brings more and more and more confusion, and more and more and more unrest. And that is the situation in the world. So the laws of God are called the codes of religion. But Shiva Prabhupada says religion is everywhere. People have come to religion with different types of spins on it. But the real religion is obedience to the laws of the Lord. That is the basis of religion. Disobedience to the Lord then causes material existence, because then we don't leave this place. We keep coming back in different bodies. There are 8,400,000 different types of bodies, Srila Prabhupada explains. And he says the list is there. In the Padma Purana, 8,400,000 types of bodies are listed. So it is a fact. But the human body, once we're here in this type of body that we have now, that we could listen to things, our senses and our minds are raised better than those of the other 8 million non-human type bodies. So we should take advantage of it. So Papa keeps stressing, take advantage, take advantage, take advantage. This is your escape body. We can go back to the spiritual world that way. Don't take anything that you do in spiritual life lightly. Don't take it lightly. It is your ticket out of the material world. So Srila Prabhupada says the only way to get out of the entanglement is to agree to obey the Supreme. But foolish human beings are trying to come up with different ways, different designations, upadhi. I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. The whole planet is divided into different countries and different titles of the countries or names, and then the people are also named that way. And so we are Europeans or Americans or Chinese or Africans or Indians and so on, all of that, and our religions. And because of that, we pitch one situation against another. And Maya has just a field day with us because we don't realize that we are of one Father. At the soul level, at the spiritual level, we are one and the same in quality. So when we understand that, and we understand that Krishna owns everything, and he's the supreme controller, and we are controlled, or we are dependent on him, and we understand and live life that way. What he wants is what we want to do. As soon as you think that way, then you are in a situation where you'll be protected and you will also be happy. Internal happiness does in fact come. It doesn't matter how imperfect we are. Srila Prabhupada explains that when we take the right instructions and live by that, then it doesn't matter how imperfect we're built. We are living according to the right set of instructions given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He gives a very simple example. A child does not know different things around them. He asks, "Father, my dear father, what is this?" The father says, "My dear son, this is called a light bulb." So then the child says, "This is a light bulb." Next time, when he sees somebody else, he can point to that and says, "This is a light bulb." And he'll be correct. Did he know ahead of time? No, he didn't. He wasn't born with that knowledge, but he got knowledge from a source that could be trusted, and the item was defined correctly, and now he lives by that knowledge. And when he has to spill it out, he will say it, and he'll say it and give the correct knowledge. So the child is imperfect. But when he gets knowledge from the perfect source, then that's perfect knowledge. And if you live by it or live with that understanding, then you're living according to the right way to do things. So that's the situation that devotees have been put in. The situation doesn't change. In the spiritual world, one is free from all kinds of distress. The spiritual world people live, or entities live, in obedience to the laws of Krishna. And therefore they are always happy, and they are loving, and the Lord loves back. And this is the situation that we're in, being trained to do that. Those outside the devotional process are not being trained to do that. They are trying to make things better in the material world, they think. But somehow the anxiety doesn't go away. And Srila Prabhupada tells them the pain of birth, the pain of death, the pain of old age, and the pain of disease still exist here. That's not being solved by the materialists. They can't solve it. They will not be able to solve it. But Krishna consciousness solves all of it. Because in Krishna consciousness, by the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and performing devotional service, one gets freed from that position of material existence. And when we take it really seriously, then this body that we're in the human body, which is the escape body, that's the one that can understand Krishna and therefore go back to Krishna. If we take it seriously, then we can go back to Godhead. We don't have to be born in Godhead. We don't have to die when we're back in Godhead. We don't have to get old. And we don't have to be diseased. The solution is there. So it is that simple, but at the same time, we are trying to take some of the things that Maya suggests to us. So, Raghu Maharaj said, Srila Bhakti Maharaj, that in every devotee's life, every day, rejoin Krishna consciousness. Whatever that was weak in our own estimation when we look back that we did, whatever our faults are, rejoin with a sincere prayer to improve our living situation, improve it spiritually. That should be the basis of our lives. We should really endeavor to be better devotees. Prabhupada says that the material part of it will be taken care of. We take the spiritual seriously, Krishna will make sure that the material part of it is also taken care of. He feeds the animals, he feeds the birds, he feeds the germs, he feeds everything. The trees. Why would he not feed us? We are also part of the 8,400,000 bodies. So he will definitely make sure that we get our whatever it is that it takes for us to go on with this life. But we have to submit ourselves to the Supreme Personality Godhead. He is an eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. Every living being is. Srila Prabhupada says that. In the liberated state, then we render loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's where the full freedom comes. Now, Srila Prabhupada says, we will enjoy on an equal level with the Lord. Or sometimes more than the Lord. So why did he say that? We enjoy on an equal level with the Lord. In the planets, Vaikuntha planets, the Lord is four-armed, the entities are four-armed. They have the same type body as the Lord. So then, at an equal level, that is one explanation. Sometimes a person, a living entity would enjoy more than the Lord. How does that happen? Well, take a case of prasad. So much prasad is served to the master. The master takes a little bit of everything that's served to him and leaves so much, a lot. And that lot is given to the servants. Now, you're having the same thing that the Lord, the master, took. But since the master was supplied so opulently with maybe 50 to 60 different types of dishes, and they took a little bit of each, quantity-wise, so much is left over. So then you get to eat the leftover, but you can eat as much as you like. And you can eat even more in quantity than the master took. In that sense, you have taken more than the Lord, your master. Or another example, sometimes I like to give, that a rich man is being served by a servant as a driver. The rich man owns a vehicle which is very expensive and very, 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 very well decked out. So many bells and whistles on this. The driver takes the owner or the rich man to wherever he asks the driver to take him. So the driver is the servant. And the driver takes this person to wherever he needs to go, drops him off, and then the car is with him, the servant. He can take it anywhere. He can do whatever he wants with it. He doesn't ever have to pay for any gas to put in the car. He doesn't maintain it. All that's done by the master, and you just get to enjoy it. Do whatever you want with it. So there's more use of the car by the servant, the driver, than even the master who sits in it. The driver serves by driving the car, but the driver's needs are met with a very, very expensive car. So in that way, the person is also enjoying like that, even though they're serving. So Srila Prabhupada has explained, and don't think that going to the spiritual world to serve the Lord means that, oh, we are in a situation where we're going to be beaten down every time he's enjoying and we're just serving, and getting tired or something of that nature. If we think that way, we're thinking materially. The service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very, very blissful. It is very, 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 very enjoyable. And the living beings also enjoy with themselves, relate wonderfully to each other in the spiritual world. And that is the world that he's trying to get us to go. So how does a devotee obey the laws? Well, now, Sri Krishna himself says it in Bhagavad Gita. Man mana bhavavat bhakto, mad yajimam namaskuru, mam iveshashi satyam te pratijane priyosimi. Renounce the world by doing what? By thinking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead all of the time. Always think of me. By serving him in devotion, become my devotee. By worshiping him and offering obeisances, offering homage to him. These four things, if you do, then we get to go back to the spiritual world. When we are thinking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we make that the main business of our lives every day, we will develop love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The person you think about a lot, you will also think, unless you're a demon and thinking about because you don't like the Lord, like the Kamsa and Shishupal, the rest were, even they got liberated because they were thinking about the Lord. How much more devotees who are thinking Lord positively, not negatively like the demons do. So when we think of the Lord in a positive way, like devotees do, we will develop love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And after all, that is the aim of a devotee, Krishna Prema. So always thinking about the Lord, you can think easily by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thinking of the Lord constantly would help us to grow in Krishna consciousness. When you think of the Lord and become his devotee, every day we must think about ways to serve the Lord. When we chant our rounds, which is very, very good for us, we are appealing to the energy of the Lord and to the Lord himself. The wonderful energy of the Lord in devotion, Srimati Radharani, the personification of devotional service. Hare and Krishna, Hare and Krishna, and Ram, the source of pleasure, then we are constantly thinking of the Lord. When we say that, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Apart from the japa in our beads, throughout the day, we think of Krishna and say Hare Krishna. Then our minds will be focused on Krishna and our days would be in that way, every time thinking about him. Become my devotee, a person that's devoted to the Lord and serving the Lord. Worship the Lord. If you do that, he says you will come to him. When you think about him, then definitely at the time of death, he'll make arrangements so you think about him. And he says that without a doubt, whatever a person is thinking at the time of death, that they will obtain. He says in the Bhagavad Gita, then you will come to him without fail. It takes thinking about him, and serving his devotees, and serving him. And this is a promise that he made. So Srila Prabhupada says that the most confidential part of knowledge is that one should become a pure devotee of Krishna and always think of him, and act for him. We should mold our lives in such a way that we can't think of anyone else but the Lord himself. We should serve devotees. When we serve devotees, that service is in connection with one who is submitted to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is also spiritual credit for us. So we should think every day, what am I going to do to serve a devotee of the Lord? It is a very powerful way to think of the day and a powerful way to also get closer to Krishna. As the example is giving, love me, love my dog. Why that example? Because the Lord owns everything. And when you serve him by serving his dog, serving his servant, he's even happier than serving him. So when you think of Krishna and you serve Krishna's devotees, Krishna will be very happy and Guru will be very happy with us. It is that simple. So find a way to give a gift, to give prasad, and look at different ways, the needs of devotees. Try to find a way to pull yourself in there to be able to serve that person by talking with that person, seeing what their needs are and trying to supply it as best you can. Listen very, very closely and help devotees that way. There is so much power in that. The power of being in community, bound in community, bound in love of community. When we serve each other, we love each other. When we serve each other, we stay with the process because we're all devotees. And in that way, Krishna will bless the society, Krishna will bless the movement. Then we should also think outside the box. How can we help others who are not devotees? Supplying prasad, book distribution, pamphlets back to Godhead distribution, different ways in which we can get people to think of Krishna, or at least get something that would register in the subconscious. So they're not devotees, but then you put something there that makes them see some connection to Krishna. That will be registered in the mind. When you give snacks that are offered to Krishna and given as prasad, any living entity that takes that prasad is on their way to starting their royal path of devotion back to Godhead. Any living entity, not humans alone, any living entity. Even if you take your Maha water, the water that's been offered with your bhoga to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you cooked, and you take that water and you pour it on a plant or on grass, that is Maha water, that's food for them. They will, in fact, begin their process of going back to Godhead. That extra, the details of that we don't have to worry about. You give them Krishna, as one of our sannyasis in this kind of started, has stated, that you will bless that particular entity, and they will start, because prasadam does its work. Srila Prabhupada calls it a secret weapon. You get people interested in Krishna consciousness. The time that they would take it seriously, that's up to the Lord and the Lord's agents. But you've done your part. So be willing to help others. And in that way, you yourself will grow and be happier in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada says that we should really, really concentrate on the form of Krishna that Arjuna saw. There are multi-forms of the Lord: Vishnu, Narayan, Rama, Varaha, and so on. Why does Srila Prabhupada says that we should not divert our attention to the other forms of the Lord, but stay with the 200 form, just like we know him in Vrindavan with the flute, or with Arjuna showing the 200 form. It is the 200 form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that devotees can have the greatest type of relation with. If you can relate to Lord Vishnu, the four-armed Vishnu, Lakshmi is the wife. You can never be the wife. But with Krishna, there were wives, demigods that became wives of Krishna in Dwarka. They were able to relate to him as wives, including Lord Brahma. Even Lord Brahma was in Dwarka, parts of him, because the demigods can, in fact, expand themselves like that. They have that ability. So Lord Brahma in Dwarka was actually Aniruddha. Gaga Samhita says that. So they were relating to the Lord in different ways. Some are sons, some are grandsons, some are wives, like that. So the Krishna would allow you in the 200 form to have the most variegated types of relationship with. And that is the highest. And that's why Srila Prabhupada says we should not divert our attention to other forms of the Lord. We can worship, but we should be very excited about thinking about the 200 form, the two-handed form of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that will give the highest. Srila Prabhupada came to give us the highest, made us know about Goloka Vrindavan, which is the topmost in terms of variety to enjoyment in the spiritual world and service to the Lord. And then he presented the Lord in the two-handed form also, made us understand it that way, because we can have, so we have the best now. And then on top of that, by our own inability to chant 64 rounds, he's brought the japa down to 16 rounds so that we can connect with him also. So we really don't have any excuse. We should, rather than having come up with excuses, we should be grateful for what we have. because the Prabhupada has given us the highest and most merciful situation that anyone can obtain from a pure devotee of the Lord. So depend on the will of the Lord at all times. And for that, in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8, Text 37. So this is prayers of Queen Kunti. After the battle of Kurukshetra, this is the purport the Prabhupada is explaining. The kings that were against the Pandavas were killed, but their sons and grandsons were still there. They didn't fight the war. Some of them did not. So they were still around to deal with the Pandavas. They were upset because their relatives, fathers, grandfathers had been killed. So it is not only the Pandavas, the Prabhupada explained, that they were put into the condition of enmity by the next generations down, but actually all of us are always in such a condition. And the best way of living is to become completely dependent on the will of the Lord. When we become completely dependent on the will of the Lord, then we can overcome all difficulties, even in material existence. Hare Krishna. So the laws of the Lord are to be obeyed. And if we do that, then our simple way, which we describe, is Man Mama Baba Bhakto, Maskuru. Think of the Lord, become his devotee, offer homage, and worship him. You must be careful not to offend devotees. That breaks up everything. Be nice to devotees, be nice to people in general. And so that will bring us back to Godhead and away from this situation that we're in. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful class, really reminding us about the purpose of why we do what we do, and how Srila Prabhupada gave us the highest, and how we can aspire to grow in our Krishna consciousness. And would like to ask devotees, if any questions, any comments, clarification, please do unmute yourself and you can ask your question, share a realization, or you can put it in the chat and I'll be happy to read it for you. One thing that I want to ask, and I'm so happy that you brought it up because it's a very much a good reminder for me about rejoining Krishna consciousness. I remember that. Thank you for bringing it up. It's a good reminder for me. Can you share simple tips of how can we rejoin Krishna consciousness in our daily lives?
So the rejoin that Bhakti Maharaj mentioned, and by the way, every time that before we take that, every time that he was getting ready to take on more devotees, then he would bring that up in his lecture. The devotees are, getting ready to take shelter of Guru, but those who are in attendance, then he says, you also should think of rejoining society. In rejoining, he said, we look at what our weaknesses are. You see, because at that time, the devotees who are getting initiation are going to take vows. And the vows that are being taken are going to be taken in front of the deities, in front of Agni, in front of the spiritual master, and in front of the devotees. And he says the devotees that are watching should also make a vow to themselves. I am going to be a better devotee. Rejoin means look at our weaknesses and pray and get solutions as to how to kick those weaknesses out of our lives. When the weaknesses are gone, then our devotion is increased in quality. It is better, and we can serve better, and with that comes the internal happiness. That is the real happiness, the happiness of the soul, happiness from the heart. So rejoining is to make an endeavor, to vow to oneself, to do the things that we have been doing wrongly, cut those off. Assess the things that we've been doing wrongly, cut those off, and the things that we want to do but have not been able to do that will help us in our devotion, make time for that. In other words, take a close assessment of how we live our lives with a view to improving the spiritual aspect of it as a matter of an emergency. to improve the spiritual aspect of it. Material aspect, that's there, but when you improve the spiritual, Krishna will take care of the material also. So rejoining is also taking vows ourselves to be a better devotee and take the process of devotion service far more seriously than we have. There's always room for growth, and we should endeavor to grow. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah, that was a very powerful point and reminder for me that every day before we go to bed, at least before we quit the night or quit the day, we should do a self-assessment of where we fell short and how we can rejoin and be a better person in our Krishna consciousness, I think is what you're trying to summarize. Thank you so much. Thank you. There's a nice question here by Dhira Krishna, and I'm going to read it. He says in Bhagavad Gita 1865, in the purport, it says, Prabhupada says, one should fix his mind on this original form of Godhead Krishna. One should not divert his attention to other forms of the Lord. The Lord has multi-forms as Vishnu, Narayan, Rama, Varaha, etc. But a devotee should concentrate his mind on the form that was present before Arjuna. So his question is, how do I present this without ending up disrespecting and offending any form or expansion of Sri Krishna?
How to present this, to live a life of thinking about the two-handed form of Krishna and not the other forms so much, because, and your question is that, how do you do that without disrespecting or offending the other forms of Krishna? Well, you can't offend the other forms of Krishna, because the other forms of Krishna are also part of Krishna. If you think of Krishna, you can't offend the Paramatma, for example. It is the same Krishna in a different form and with a different purpose. But Krishna is a sum total. All are expansions of him, and the original is him. So just like we've been given the example that you water the root of a plant, all parts of the plant are satisfied. It's not really that connected, but there's some connection if you think about it. You go to the original source. Krishna is the original for all of these expansions. He's the original. Therefore, if you think of Krishna, the two-handed form of Krishna, then all the expansions are basically respected anyway, but just by thinking about the two-handed form. So in that sense, one cannot disrespect or offend any other form or expansion of Krishna. It is good to know, though, that these expansions, because then that makes us see how great Krishna is. The forms and the activities and the pastimes of these different forms of Krishna, the expansions of Krishna, excite us in Krishna's activities the more that we know about it. But to relate to Krishna in the two-handed form is the one which, we're going to go to where the two-handed form is, the original form is. And that's where you get your most relationship, most rasas form. And that's why Sri Prabhupada says, please, think of that form so that you can go to that form and be able to relate to that form of Krishna, the original form. Hare Krishna.
I hope that helped there, Krishna. I'm waiting for his answer. Yes, he says yes. Thank you. Any other questions from devotees? Any thoughts, any takeaways, reflections, comments?
Very, very good point, though. But when you are thinking
Yes.
of two-handed form, you're not disrespecting anyone in the other form. You're not. You can't be, because they're all in there. They are automatically respected.
Yeah, because I think what's coming to my mind is, and I don't know if you spoke about this in your answer, because if we look at, Krishna was the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, and from him, all the other forms come. So eventually, all the other forms are part of him in his two-handed form,
Yes.
right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for confirming and clarifying that. Just a humble reminder to devotees that this evening we will continue with Bhagavad Gita, hearing from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada says, so please do join us this evening at 6 o'clock to hear more of Srila Prabhupada as he instructs us on the Song of God. You know, we had a very beautiful lecture by Vishnupada Prabhu, and this month is Prabhupada Marathon. It's very important that we also hear from Srila Prabhupada, who wrote the Bhagavad Gita, and his lectures actually on that. So please do join us this evening at 6 o'clock. Online, we will send we do send reminders out. Until then, if there are no questions, no comments or reflections, we thank you all for joining us. Vancha Kapatu Biascha, Kripasindu Prapati Namavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Have a wonderful day, devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.